All right. So we are on session revision set 3. So everyone will call to answer a question. So please don't shy away. So for again, remember the general principle for every question. When you read a question, you look at what are the key points. It's very important, or what's very important that that question is asking. Because you may see when you start looking at the answers, you may miss out on understanding what is being asked in the question. So I really encourage that. It's good to always think about that. Some may be just obvious, but some you may need to just sit back and look before you look. And if you can look at that and know the answer, even before looking at the different answer options, you are much more better placed to have it right. So on this question, which of the following are the best practices that can help secure your AWS resources using the AWS Identity and Access Management Service? Select two. So as I said, this is for Edwin. So just look at the question and then try
Uh,
those.
yeah, I think the two are grant list privilege and use inline policies instead of customer managed policies. I'm
Okay.
not I'm not very certain about the second one, but
Okay, that's fine. So, but just look at what is the question talking about? What's the key important point that should guide you?
uh best practices, first of all, is a keyword for me.
Right?
And identity I am I am
Mhm.
service.
Okay. No, that's fine. So best practices that can help secure your resources using IAM. So this should help you think about the IAM model we have. We did discuss some best practices. I think that makes me think of looking at that. So now if you look at the different options, so you say you go for least privilege and this. Anyone has a different view? Is there anyone who thinks that may be different? Just checking with the rest. Okay, no one thinks have a different view. So you have grant most privilege, lock away your AWS account root user access keys. Then you have use Bastion host, right? The question is what is Bastion host? But we'll see that the reason I'm pointing out, always remember, I always say that if you are able to know why the others are wrong, you are much more than confident with your answer. So since no one has a different view from you, I'll just leave it for now and let's just check and see. But you should make sure that you know the difference between inline policies and customer managed policies as well when answering this. See, that's not correct. And that has to do with, yeah, what will be inline policy? Um, I'm trying to go back to, we did have that in our best practices. I'm very sure we had this in our. I'm trying to look for that. If you go to IAM that we covered, there was a point where we had IAM best practices in the lab session. Okay, you see. So this is what is going to help you at least have that. Um, so if you look at IAM best practices, strongly recommended that you do not use the root user for your everyday task, even the administrative user. Use the root user only to create your first IAM user, right? Securely lock away the root user credentials and use them to perform only a few account and service management tasks, right? So this is almost going in line with uh, this part of the question. Lock away your AWS account root user access keys. You see, so if you go to our notes, you have to securely lock away the root user credentials. And what you also have from that is the access keys. You know, you should always lock the access keys. And remember, we did define the access keys. Also remember what access keys is. It's a combination of the access key ID and a secret access key. And you use this where you want to make programmatic calls. Yeah. So that was just a tip here. When one of the best practice is to lock away your AWS account root user, as well as grant list privilege. That was absolutely correct. And for inline policies, instead of customer managed policies, you instead see that this is instead the reverse. So if you were to look at, I am here. So these are some of the best practices. There are many more. So what I'll do is I'll share this on chat. Just copy that and for everyone to look into. Yeah. It's incorrect because it should be the other way around. So you always advise then to use customer managed policies, not inline policies. Most of the time, users are discouraged from using inline policies, right? So just keep that in mind. Bastion host is just something else. It's a server, and that kind to act like a gateway to access host on your VPC. So this was just out of place. Anyone has a question on this? Remember, this is always like an opportunity to also review. That's why I take time to point a few things or explain more. Okay. No one has a question on that, so let's proceed to the next question. We have more people joining, so I'm going to, as usual, just remember, please be ready to take a question before we go. So let's go to the next question, and hopefully we can cover more. So this question will go to you, Leslie. What is the most secure way to provide applications temporary access to your AWS resources?
Okay.
So what's key in this question? What are you looking for?
Temporal access to your AWS.
Correct. So that's a key phrase. So what will be that? No worries, just take your time and look at the options we have.
I think 2 and 3.
Sorry?
2 and 3.
You have A, B, C, D. Which one is that? We need to, because I can't hear. C.
D.
B.
Yeah.
Okay. So Leslie says B. So the question is, what is the most secure way to provide applications temporary access to AWS resources? Create an IAM policy that allows the application to access the resources and attach the policy to the application. So anyone has a different view. When you hear temporary access, what comes to mind?
Probably D. create an IAM role and have the application assume the role.
Okay, well, that says D. Any other person support or disagree? We have two people with different views. One last person to either support or maybe pick another choice. What is the answer? At least I know you people are thinking. Someone should also say something. C, Maureen says C. So we're instead our options are spreading. We have B, C, D. Remember the key thing is provide applications temporary access to AWS, right? So what should always come to mind when you want to have temporary access? One last person to answer and then we move ahead. One other person to support. Okay. Okay, no one is coming in. So I'll just leave because it's all spread. I was thinking one person will pick and then I'll take the majority. Someone again says C. Create an IAM group that has access to the resources and add the application there. So we'll have two people saying C. So this is what I'm going to do. Not necessarily that is right. I'm going to take the highest number. Two people say C, one says B, and one says D. So keep, for those of you who are just keep your options in mind. Yeah, Solly, you want to say something, Shay, Solly?
I know it was by accident.
Sorry? That's okay.
So it was an accident.
I see, okay. So that's two. So now let's look, so just keep, let's see which one is correct. And of course it's D. So temporary access. And this is why I want, if you go again back to our IAM, it's not far from what we did look at. We did cover, okay. Right, we did cover IAM role. And this is what we said. IAM role, an identity with permission policies that determine what the identity can and cannot do in AWS. Instead of being uniquely associated with one person, a role is intended to be assumable by anyone, not the word assumable. So when you hear of a role, it can be assumed by anyone, right? Rules always have temporary keys. You see, it's temporary. Rules are used to assign temporary access keys to services or users. They have temporary access keys, right? So by assuming the rule, the access keys grant the identity permissions that have been assigned to the rule. So, and then here's an example. We are creating an application that runs on an Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud instance, and that application makes requests to AWS S3. So that's when you can use a rule. So an application that wants to access EC2. So here's an application that is accessing an AWS resource, in this case, EC2. So this is what this question is almost about. Applications, temporary access to your AWS resources. So each time you see temporary access in a question or in your studies, just start thinking of an IAM rule. An IAM group is used mostly when you want to have many users. You want to grant let's say, a policy to many users, and rather than assigning it to individual users, what you do is you create a group, put all of them in that group, and then apply the policy on that group, and then everyone will inherit it, right? An IAM policy, this one instead give permanent access. This one is used for temporary, and an IAM policy that you allow an application to access a resource. When you use the IAM policy and put it to a user, the user will instead have the permanent access, right? Create an IAM user with access keys and assign it to the application. You don't do this, right? This will also have, if you create an IAM user is always created for a person, like you always have that, and then assign it to application, it doesn't go. So just reminding everyone, when we finish this, if you are still having difficulties with IAM, I recommend that just go back and review the slides we have or the video as well, because IAM is a very important topic in the exams. Yeah. All right. Any question? Anyone having difficulties? At least it's clear now, right? So the catch here was temporary access, and IAM rule always goes with that. Good. Okay, the next question. This will go to you, Linda. Which of the following policies grant the necessary permissions required to access your Amazon S3 resources? Select two. So when you did S3, which policies grant necessary permissions required to access your Amazon S3 resources? I've just repeated what is key here. Policies that grant the necessary permissions required to access Amazon S3. Which of these two will be? This was covered in the S3 model. Linda, are you with us? Just checking. Linda, if you are speaking, you're on mute. Or if you are not able to speak, you can give your answer on chat in terms of A, B, C, D, E. Okay. If Linda is not there, you want to, yeah, you want to try this, Maureen?
Yes, I can try.
Yes. Thank
B
you.
and B and C.
B and C, you say. Okay. Sorry, Linda, I see you are putting your hand up. Maybe you are talking and we didn't hear you. You are on mute. So, right. So you say B and C. So the key thing again is policies that grant the necessary action, the permissions that grant the required to access Amazon S3. Okay, I see. Also some answers coming in, but so you have to think when the Amazon S3, what was used to discuss regarding policies, right? What are the different ways you can control the access of objects? Remember, you can always create an S3 bucket, and then you can put upload files into it, and these are referred to as objects. So you could put your media file in it. It can be an audio file. It can be a picture or just a text document, a Word document, for example. Static data is used in storing S3. There are different ways in which to do that. So yeah, I see user policies, bucket policy. I see object, someone has mentioned A as well. Routing policies, network access control policies is out for now. No one talks about that. So for for time, let's just check and see. I'll just leave it as it is and let's see if that was correct. And yeah, and that's correct. So you had that right. So you have user policies. So when granting permissions, you decide who is getting them, which Amazon S3 resources they are getting permissions for, and specific actions you want to allow those resources. Oh, sorry. Yeah, quite understand. Bucket policy and user policy are two of the access policies available for you to grant permission to Amazon S3 resources. Both use JSON-based access body policy language. You add a bucket policy to a bucket to grant other AWS accounts or IAM users access permissions for buckets and the objects you need. User policies are policies that allow an IAM user to access one of the buckets. So you always use a user policy. Remember, a policy always determines what a user can access in a particular AWS resource. So you always need it, right? So I'll just put this again on chat for those who are taking notes and maybe just to keep yourself up to date. The other ones don't, right? So it's not object policies. We don't have object policy. We don't have that for granting users access. Okay. So that was Maureen. Thank you for that. So I'll move to, yeah, the next question is for you, Wada. Which service lets you create rules to filter web traffic based on conditions that include IP address, HTTP headers, or custom URIs? So this question is talking about what? What is the key point in this question?
Creating the rules to filter web traffic conditions.
So you're creating rules to filter web traffic, and that is going to be, I think this also is important, it's going to be based on conditions that will include
the IP addresses. I think AWS Trusted Advisor, A.
Okay, so create rules to filter web traffic based on conditions that include that. You say A. So yeah, when you talk about filter web traffic, right? HTTP headers and custom RFGs. So let me just leave like that. Anyone has a different view. When you hear about filter web traffic, what comes to mind also? What are you trying to do? So it comes to knowing your services again. Okay, so the question is, anyone has a different view, support, or everyone thinks it's trusted advisor then? Which is okay, we're advising. Okay, I see no one say anything, so I'll leave it as it, but keep in mind what we're talking about. So it's definitely not trusted advisor. So when you're talking about, we immediately start seeing you creating rules, you start thinking of something like to filter web traffic, what is used to filter traffic. So when you see the word create rules to filter traffic, what you should start thinking of is it's like a firewall, you know, what acts like a firewall, because you want to filter. You don't want all the traffic to pass. But then the other thing is based on conditions like IP address, HTTP headers, or custom URLs. That's where the difference also comes. So as I say, it's here it's testing also your services. So web application firewall gives you, so the first thing is WAF. As I say, when you think of filtering web traffic, you start thinking of the firewall. And AWS Web Application Firewall gives you control over how traffic reaches your application by enabling you to create security rules that block common attack patterns. So you see, you are filtering traffic. So when you're have the AWS Web Application Firewall, you create rules and that will block some patterns. And remember SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and rules that filter out specific patterns. And I want to remind everyone to know this service very well. It will always come up. You at times you see they're asking which service can be used to block SQL injection or cross-site scripting. It will have still come in that way and will just be taken off what you see here. So if you don't know web application firewall, that was done in the security course, but I share that again on chat. So AWS WAF conditions will always include. So when you are creating a rule, so as we say, it's a rule, and when you will start doing more hands-on, you realize what that is. You always create a rule that will that will filter traffic. Here you see a source address. It could be where the IP address, it could be HTTP headers, the body, the URL string, and all these different conditions. But when you talk about Trusted Advisor, it's just an online tool that provides you real-time guidance to help you provision your resources following AWS best practices. It will not help you in filtering web traffic. So make sure that you have this understanding of Trusted Advisor. It's just an online tool that will help you provision resources based on AWS best practices. And as I always say, if you are studying and you are trying to look very fast what any of these services are, you can just always type AWS, like in this case, AWS Trusted Advisor. So it provides recommendations that help you follow AWS best practices. Trusted Advisor evaluates your account by using checks. If you remember when we did there's different support plans. There was an option of the Trusted Advisor, and there's one where you have full checks. There's one where you have a certain number of checks, right? So again, that is a question on if you are thinking of billing and pricing, you may need to know which support plan will support full Trusted Advisor checks, because since this is giving you best recommendations on how to use to follow AWS best practices, when you are able to access all the different number of checks, it's much more expensive. When you are just given just a few, you see just a little, and there's so that this goes back to that table that was covered, I think, by Lady T in billing and pricing. Remember that. Okay, I'm talking on this here. AWS Basic Support and AWS Developer Support customers can only access core security checks and checks for service quarters, you see. But then the business support and AWS Enterprise can access all checks. So those are the 4 checks. So that's what Trusted Advisor does. It's an online tool that provides you real-time guidance to help you provision your resources following best practices. The network access control lists and security groups are both incorrect because they are just security layers inside your VPC. If you need to filter web traffic, the WAF is suitable. Where do you use the network access control list? Who remembers? Or let me start with, where do you use a security group? I think this one should help, then move. Because it's important to know the difference between the security group and the network access control list. Who remember? But where do you use a security group? At what point? What do you think, Shay Sally? Where do you use the security group, Sally? Just try. What can you remember about security group?
Uh,
Anyone else?
I can try.
Yes, thanks, Maureen. Go ahead.
Security security groups is 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 a component. VPC component that checks permissions for Amazon EC2.
Right. Amazon EC2, right? So you use
Yeah,
that on EC2.
on EC2,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Okay.
network control list. It's a packet permissions for subnets.
Subnet level.
Yeah,
Right.
subnet. And then
Yeah. So I don't want to go through that at the moment, but go to if you look at the security group where we had the differences between security group and network access control list, and everyone should learn those differences. They are very important. The security group you always use that at the EC2 level. The network access control list, you use that at the subnet level. Yeah. So that was just an aside to that question and a point to send a reminder. Right. So the next question here goes to, did I have, yeah, okay, well, that already came in. Yeah, so this will go to you, Solly. Which of the following is true if you store your data in AWS? So just look at these statements and tell us which one is true.
I think the third one is correct, that you are the owner of the data you store in AWS.
Okay, which of the following is true?
And the last one, AWS has the right to review any data stored for potential threats.
The question needs just one answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Which of the following is true if you store data in AWS? Yeah. So from those two, you prefer which one?
The third one.
The third one, C. Okay. So when you are required, if the question requires that you should give two answers, it will always say select true or something like that. If not, you just have to pick one. And yeah, and if you notice for those cases, you see if I try to pick another one, only that one, it will then move away. So yeah. Okay, good. You say C. Any other person have a different view or support? So the question is, what is true here?
Support.
Okay.
in the chat.
Okay. Maureen, you say A. Okay, so let's look at that. You have, so two people say C, one says A, so C is leading. So A says encryption is required for all data at rest and in transit. All data are stored durably and redundantly in different AZs. You are the owner of the data you store in AWS. Thank you, Sandrine. Also support, so 3 people for C. AWS has the right to review any data stored for potential threats. So let's answer this question, then I come to you. I see you have your hand up. So you say B. Okay, so we have 1A, 1B, 3 C's. So let's check and see which one is correct. Thanks for your participation. I think people are warming up better. So it's actually C. Now, so we have to figure out why the other ones are wrong. It's important, right? But the question is, do you always require encryption all the time for data at rest and in transit? Do you always require that? Because encryption, this question says encryption is required, but is that true? I mean, is it something you must always do? You know, so this is not something you should always do. It is not a must that it should be. It's good to have, but it's not like it's a requirement that has to be there. There's no such requirement imposed by AWS. Now, this one, so just keep that in mind. There's no requirement imposed by AWS that you have to do that, right? Encryption here is you are trying to have data at rest means like when you store, let's say, a file in an S3 bucket, that means that data is at rest, it's sitting there. And then the question is, must you encrypt it? There's no requirement. Encryption is you want to have the data converted into some kind of jargon that if someone was to download it, they will not understand it. And the only person who will be able to understand it is when you will decrypt it, because when you encrypt any data, you always have what is called an encryption key, and it always belongs to the person who has done the encryption, right? And then for any other person to be able to read that data, they need to have the encryption key, and it's always done for protection of the data. But there is no condition that imposes that you must always do that. It's a good thing to do, but it's not a must. And then when you say in transit, that means when your data is traveling. For example, if you are trying to upload a file to your S3 bucket, there may be a recommendation that as that data is traveling, it should be encrypted. So because when you're uploading a file, it leaves your computer, it goes online, it goes before it sits, it reaches the S3 bucket and is stored. So that process when the data is traveling is what is called transit, right? So that's the other point. You don't need to do that. Since all data are stored durable and redundantly in different AZs. Now this is where the questions, if you remember, there is when you did S3, there is what we also had, like one zone, right? One zone is where data is stored in only one availability zone. So if you remember that, that will take away this, because in one zone, data is stored also only on one AZ and not on different AZs. So this is not always the case, right? And it also depends on what you are setting. And then AWS have the right to review any data stored for potential threats. That's not true. AWS, your data, because if that was the case, then people will not trust using AWS. Companies don't want, we use, even the data centers is used by AWS, but always remember that even AWS employees cannot access your data. They don't have that possibility. The way it's built is set up in a way that, and that's why you have IAM permissions, right? So you grant only those who have to access that data. If someone don't have that permission, they will not access it. So I know it can be easy or misleading to think that because AWS on the data centers, if you store data there, they can just go, an AWS employee can just go and see it. No, that's not possible. So AWS don't have that right. And even if they wanted to, they will not be able to access it, right? So I hope everyone gets that. And yeah, also for this one, it is always up to the customer to decide whether they want to use data in different AZs or in one AZ. Yeah. Right, so that's what I covered there, and that has to do with yeah, security and compliance here. Anyone has a question there? Okay, I think let's do your hand up was for the option you wanted to give. So thank you, everyone. The next question is for Tamojang. An employee is asking for access to your S3 buckets. What should be the level of access that you should provide him? So I think it's straightforward. An employee is asking for access to your S3 buckets. What level of access should you provide him? Okay, thank you. Tamarian says A on chat. So anyone has a different view? I see Goada supports A. So two people say A. Seems, what about the others? Anyone thinks it's A? or has a different view? Remember, you are an employee is asking to access that. What should you provide to him? What about the others? Please be more active. Write something on chat or say something. Okay, I see Tim Lawi says A as well. So I have 3 answers, so I can move ahead. But let's just say C. At least that's good to always have a different view. And then we then explain why. But at the moment we have 3 people says A and 1 says C. So let's go with the majority. And the answer is A. But then why is C wrong? Remember, the question is an employee is asking for access to your S3 bucket. What should be the level of access you should provide to him? What is the best? We did come across this, but I just want to ask that, what is the guideline to provide access to customers? What is the guiding principle that we have seen? What should you always give to? Can someone say the word that that you should always come to your mind when you want to grant users access to AWS resources? What should you always do? It's one of the best practices. I think Edwin did say that when we covered his question. Edwin, you remember what that was? When you want to grant users access to AWS resources, what should you always give them? What kind of access should you always give them?
Least privilege.
Least privilege. Yes, that's correct. So you always think of least privilege. So if someone wants to access a resource, you want to give him least privileges. So the question is, you need to know what they need first. So that's why this is correct. Ask what type of access he requires and only provide him with those permissions. So you are only providing him with that. That's this principle of least privilege, right? So in the question of C, if you give him only read access, the point here is we have not been told that he needs only read access. If the question was an employee needs read access to your S3 bucket, now we know that the employee needs read access. Then you give him read-only access. Or if you said an employee, needs only read access to this, what should be the level of access? Then you just give him what they want. But if you don't know, then you need to know first what they know, because you may give them read-only access when maybe they actually require but administrator access, or maybe they need only write and read as well, or they require full access. So the general principle is not just for the exam, but even if you are practicing in AWS and you are interacting with people, if they want something, you always have first to know what they want, and then you give them just that. And there are ways to set those permissions, right? Okay. So I think I don't need to push that more. I think we answered that. So the next question is, sorry, I answered, Tamuya answered. The next question is for you, Sandrine. Try this. Let's see. Which of the following is a threat detection service that continuously monitors for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior to protect your AWS accounts and workloads? So the question is, which of the following is a threat detection service that continuously monitors for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior to protect your AWS accounts and workloads? This is testing knowledge of the services. Okay, Sandrine says D. Okay. So remember, which of the following is a threat detection service that continuously monitors for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior? Yeah, Sandrine said D. That's AWS WAF, right? Protect AWS accounts and workloads. I see 2 B's and 1 C. So I see 2 people say 2 B's, 1 C, 1 D. I see Baron Leslie Young. Okay, 4 people are going for B, right? So yeah, that's enough. So we have 4 people. So yeah, so once the first person gives the answer, we can always have options. So let's look at B. So I'll go with B, sorry. So and check, let's check if that's correct. Always remember that it does not always mean majority is correct, but in this case, it's correct. And if you go to Amazon duty, this is Amazon guard duty. This is what when you are learning the services, this is what you should remember. Immediately you see trade dictation services that continuously monitors for malicious activity, right? Unauthorized behavior, and it has to do with your accounts and workloads. Actually, this is the definition of AWS guard duty. And if you were to go to check what that is, that's exactly what you see. So it uses machine learning algorithm, protects your AWS accounts with intelligent trade dictation, right? Amazon Guard Duty is a trade dictation service that continuously monitors your AWS accounts and workloads for malicious activity. You see, so all of this is what we have seen in the question, because we were asking for trade dictation service that continuously monitors your accounts and workloads for malicious activity and delivers detailed security findings for visibility and remediation. So remediation is fixing them. So that's the definition of guard duty, right? So if you look at so this is the opportunity again to remember what guard duty is, and it's a very important. I mean, all the services that we see here that we're revising for your exam is important. So I'll just put this on chat what guard duty is again. It's a trade dictation service that continuously monitors for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior to protect your AWS accounts and workloads. With the cloud, the calculation and that. I know it uses machine learning algorithm to do all of that, but yeah, the key thing is when you see trade dictation service that monitors for malicious activity, that's what you do. Now the question is, who remembers what AWS WAF is? What is the full meaning of WAF? Can someone come up and say?
AWS Web Application File System.
AWS Web Application Firewall, right? And we say that this is key for SQL injection, scripting, and rules that will filter some specific traffic. And so that's what you should think of WAF. Who remembers what Messi is? It's also another service that everyone should try to always remember. When you see Messi, what should come to mind? Personal identify information. Let's see that. It's a service that uses machine learning to automatically discover, classify, and protect sensitive data in AWS. And some of this sensitive data is what is called personal identify information. Let's see, it's PII. Discover and protect sensitive data. It uses that. Okay, this is, it doesn't talk more about that, but discover and protect your sensitive data at scale, right? It is a data security and data privacy service that uses machine learning and pattern matching to discover and protect your sensitive data. And what I was talking about, in some question, they'll always put this personal identifiable information. They will always refer to it as PPI, sensitive information. And personal identifiable information can be something like your date of birth, your social security number, your maybe bank account details. So if you accidentally upload this on AWS have the possibility to dictate this information and then wants to protect it, right? Because it's sensitive information that is kind of like private. So if you go to read more, I think if you I'm trying to see. So there will be more that is set on that if you were looking like if you wanted to find out more. But the key thing is it protects your sensitive data. But I was bringing up the concept of PII because I know that in some questions they may put that out, and you're wondering what is PII. So yeah, trying to see if I can see that here and copy and paste, but that's not available here. So we have talked about Messi, and then Shield. Always remember Shield is a distributed denial of service, DDoS. So distributed denial of service is, remember, it's just a kind of situation where, let's say you have a web server, right? Like when you are going to the website, you always click, it's a request that goes and you get a response back. So there are some, what happens is people can try to, like, maybe if a company, imagine like for Amazon.com, there may be some people, maybe for some reason, they have issues with Amazon.com or any website, anyhow, it could be a government website. So criminals at times may try to send so much requests to the website in such a way that the website is overwhelmed. So it's always like, and what happens is to do distributed denial of service, most people always take hostage some computers around the world. So that's why it's always when you are installing some kind of software on your computers, you could have a virus, and maybe your computer is being used as one of those to launch attacks to other websites, and you will not even know. And yeah, that's why you always have all this web firewall protection services that try to protect any kind of access that you are not aware of. But what I'm distributed denial of services, that's why it's distributed. So you have many computers sending many requests to one web server in such a way that it becomes overwhelmed, and then someone who genuinely wants to use that website is not able to access it. So you may have that, you may hear that the website is down. So if you thinking of, especially in the West, where many websites are used for online shopping, and if so much traffic is sent and the website is not able to save the customers, it will be a big financial loss for them. Or it can just be a government website. You can have some people, just criminals, who may want to attack a government website and bring it down. And then, and then nothing will be happening at that time. So just trying to explain to you what distributed denial of service is. So each time you hear AWS Shield, think of distributed denial of service, right? So this is a service that helps protect your resources from that kind of attack. Okay, any question? I think there's none. Okay, let's go to Team Lawir. Someone from Team Lawir should answer this. Which of the following security group rules are valid? Select two. Which of the following security group rules are valid? Select two. I know this is a tricky one for Team Lawir, but there are four of you, so put your heads together. Try. Okay, so you say, and the better I see, I will say C and D. Okay. A, B, C, so this C and D. Outbound MySQL rule with IP address as source. Inbound RDP rule with an with an address range as source, A and C. So let me see. C is featuring. I have D. I've had A and D. Inbound HTTP rule with security group ID as source. C has featured 3 times. A has featured 2 times. D has featured 2 times for the quiz, for the answers that I'm seeing. But at least C seems to be there. Outbound my SQL rule with IP address as source, right? And then D, we have D and we have A. So I'll go with that way just to like, because it's 2, 2. And then let's try to see which one is correct. So this inbound TCP rule with instance ID as source. I fully understand this can be very tricky, and I'm sure most of you can be wondering what is this talking about. But this is much more clearer when you do the the practice rule on creating security groups, how it always look like. So A and D are actually correct. So okay, now we did say C and D. Yeah, okay, I was picking E, not realizing. I wanted to pick with D for you. So A and D are correct. And remember that in the AWS exam, if you have the possibility to select 2 options and you select only one correct one, if the other one is wrong, you fail the question. There is no half point, right? So either you have it, you have the options correct, or you fail. So always make sure that in any situation where you have to select 2, you do your best to make sure that you find the 2 answers that are correct. Because if one is wrong, you won't get a point. Yeah. So yeah, so we have A and D are the correct answers. And as I say, I can't really start explaining this most, but when we go to creating security groups, you see what will always come up. So the type you always see the type of traffic, the protocol, the port range, and the source can either be a security group or it can be an IP address. So inbound HTTP rule with security group ID as source. That's correct. So you can have an IT, this is HTTP traffic, for example, and the source here is a security group. So that can be possible. And you can also have inbound RDP rule with an address range as source. So you can have this address range in this case. But the other ones, outbound MySQL rule with IP address as source. This is IP address. Outbound, that's not possible. But I'll leave that for, if you're looking more into how to create security groups and try to read that more, you understand if you want to go to details. But this is just what we can have for this question. More of that can be covered later as well in our subsequent course. But always remember that you can have source can be a security group ID, or it can be an address range. When you see the 0.0.0.0/0, that means any IP address. This always represents any IP address. Yeah. So just keep that in mind when you see this. And then the other ones are wrong. Inbound TCP rule with instance ID. You don't have instance ID, is incorrect. Instance ID is, or host names are not valid values. So you cannot use an instance ID as a source. The only source you can have is security group ID, right? Or address range. So keep that in mind. So if you see a question and it's talking about a source and it's not talking about a security group ID or address range, like in this case, instant ID as source is incorrect. Outbound host name as destination is also incorrect. outbound MySQL rule with IP address as source is incorrect because the source cannot be modified. Since it is outbound, you should specify the allowed destination. So when you are talking about outbound, you are always bothered more about the destination instead of the source. So this is just trying to play with the mind. Yeah. So just take note of what can be used on the source and what cannot be used. You can use security group here. And then, yeah. Any question? Okay, let's continue. This is still for Team Lawil. I know there are 4 of you. The next person should take this. A customer has recently experienced an SQL injection attack on their web application database hosted in EC2. They submitted a complaint ticket to AWS. What should be the response from AWS? So who is answering this from Team Lawil? There are 4 of you. So a customer has experienced, just come out and explain what you think about this question, the person answering, yeah? What's the key point before you answer?
I think the key points, first of all, you know that SQL injections are attacks on your website, or yeah, on your website. So first of all, they already answered your question. Yeah, the first problem, which was which AWS customer service should you inquire any support from? And then now the main problem here is what should AWS do to solve the problem?
Okay. So if you have that and then you submit a complaint ticket, because so a customer is experiencing this and they have submitted a ticket to AWS that we have this problem, what should AWS do to that case? So yeah, look at the options and tell us what you think will be the answer.
Okay. I think it's B.
So let's start with the question answers. AWS should secure their infrastructure better to reduce these kinds of incidents. AWS and the customer should contact a third-party auditor to verify the incident, right? So AWS should not be liable for damages since the customer should have properly patched the EC2 instance. AWS should reiterate that the customer is responsible for security of the application in the cloud. So yeah, those are the different options. I think Wada is saying that D is correct. Linda says it's D as well. So 2 people are going for D. I want you to stop and think again, everyone else also to like, but I have 2 people thinking, but the key thing here is remember to always understand what is the question talking about. What service is responsible for taking care of SQL injection attacks? Who remembers? Say it loud. Someone should come out and just say it loud.
Shell.
No, it's not Shield.
Firewall.
What kind of say the service? The service has a full name. Yeah, it has firewall on it, but what is the service? We just covered that. What service is that, please?
WAF.
WAF, right? Web application firewall is responsible for SQL injection attacks. So that is a service that AWS gives to deal with anything that has to do with that. Web applications here is hosted on database. So if you are creating so that's the first thing. A customer has recently experienced that, and there's a service from AWS that can handle that. But what they are doing is they have submitted a complaint ticket to AWS. I hope everyone is following the line of the question, right? Or the reasoning, or how you should look into this. First of all, you have SQL injection attacks. But the next point is AWS has given you a service that should always handle issues like that. So the point is, why should you be reaching out to AWS again? So this tries to deal with the issue of shared responsibility model, right? Where AWS is responsible for some part and you are responsible for some part. The issue of your data in the cloud is your responsibility. It's not, so security, this has to do with security in the cloud, you know. So if you have your application, AWS have provided all the services that you should configure to protect your application. So if you reach out to AWS, they will just not, that's what they will just tell you, you know, we're not responsible for that. So AWS and the customer should contact a third-party auditor to verify the incident. That's definitely not correct. AWS should be liable for damages since the customer should have probably, that's of course again, because that's from the, it's like the agreement that you should know from the start before using AWS. So if you don't know how to configure your applications to avoid attacks, and if something happens, you can't be blaming AWS for not doing it. You are the one who have, you know, you don't know how to use that. AWS to use the AWS services. AWS should secure the infrastructure better to reduce these kinds of incidents. This doesn't have anything to do with the infrastructure. You know, the security of the cloud, the infrastructure is like the data centers and all of them always, you don't, at times with AWS, to even know where their data center is difficult because of security reasons. They don't publish it. You only know that, yeah, there's a data center, for example, in Frankfurt or in US, North Virginia. But if you were to go to find out the location, it will take time, and for you to even have access to go to that area is difficult. So the infrastructure is really well secured. So this was a question on, yeah, you handling security. So I advise everyone to go back to the shared responsibility model in case you are wondering. And as I say, always try to reason the question and try to figure out the direction, and then you always see that, you know. I hope that did help. So I'm not going to be reviewing all of this. I think we have touched all of that, what it should be. So the next question is, yeah, still someone from Team Lawil. What is the best way to keep track of all activities made in your AWS account? The best way to keep track of all activities made in your AWS account. So I think this one is just straightforward, right? You are making, what will track activities of made in your AWS account? What should come to mind? So that's for Team Lawil again. Who's the next person? So one says use LDB authentication. B says create a multi-region trail, use Amazon workloads, set up MFA. Yeah, Guada, I see you say B. I wanted someone from Team Lawil first to come in. So what would be the right one there? Who is the next person in the group to answer? Mustafa has answered, I know, right? Okay, B. All right. So two people say Team Lawil say B and Guada support that. Anyone has a different view? But can some, for the person who said B in Team Lawil, what is the guiding, what guides you to say is B and not the other points? That's the other thing. So like, what is the key thing in the question? Yeah. Just to have that conversation for others who maybe are doubting why you are choosing B. At times when someone explains this from the members, the others explain much better than me even explaining, yeah. So why did you choose B? I mean, I'm not making it.
Yeah, I want to talk with the kids. I'm making noise. That's why I'm looking for the right moment to talk.
I see. That's
Yeah.
okay. Mhm.
Yeah, I think keeping trail of all the activities in your account is always the work of a cloud trail,
Okay.
like monitoring the logins and following the login trails. Who did this and who did that? It's always the work of cloud trail.
Okay.
And
Well,
then
thank you for that. Yeah. So track all activities made in your AWS account, right? So let's check that. Two people say B. So always when you see, remember we have seen AWS guard duty. It also had to do with your account. I always try to say that always learn these services in pairs. You will remember better. Guard duty was brought up as a threat dictation, looks of malicious activity in your AWS accounts and workloads, right? So it's just a threat dictation service. But it does not track all activities, but what will be the next one that will track all activities in your AWS account? Because I'm bringing up guard duty because guard duty is always doing threat dictation in your AWS accounts and workloads. But if you are trying to track who did what, as was explained, who did what, when, and at what time, what IP address was even accessing it, you always think of CloudTrail, and always think of CloudTrail, when you walk into a room and go out, you leave a trail, right? It could be the soles of your shoes. That's the trail that you leave, right? So when you hear of CloudTrail, it is always what you leave behind. So when you access AWS, you always leave a trail, and the trail could be what you did, even just clicking, just signing in on your AWS account. It's always recorded on CloudTrail that this person signed in. And if you do anything, you will know that you did it and it will put the time when you did it. So it's a very great service that can be used for auditing purposes. So if you want to track all activities made in your AWS account, you always use CloudTrail. Amazon CloudWatch logs to log all activities. That's not used for that. MFA to log who is currently in your environment. Those ones don't suit, right? So CloudWatch logs enables you to centralize the logs from your system's application services that you use in a single high scalable service. It cannot log everything, it's completely a different logging service. We know what MFA is, multi-factor authentication, right? LDAP is something else. So yeah, CloudTrail is the right answer. The last question for, I think this is the last for team now. A company is using Amazon S3 to store their static media content, such as photos and videos. Which of the following should you use to provide specific users access to the bucket? So what's the question talking about? A company is using Amazon S3 to store their static media content, such as photos and videos. Which of the following should you use to provide specific user access to the bucket?
Bucket policy.
Please turn up if you.
Great, okay. I hear bucket policy. Anyone has a different view? I see where that support that. So which of the following should you use to provide specific users access to the bucket? So here you are dealing with permissions, right? So if you are trying to provide specific access, you are trying to provide permissions. And interestingly, so two people says D here. What about the others before we proceed? You can say that or you type on chat. I need 2 more people to say something. Sorry, someone said C.
I'm saying that security. I was trying to explain because you said we should explain the other answers why it's not.
No, I was just saying 2 more answers. Yeah, before we go to that, yeah.
Okay.
So I see, okay, 2 more people have said Z. So let's just check this and go. Yeah, so come ahead and explain, come up with your explanation. That's good as well. Try that, yeah. Why is security group not that, yeah?
A security group is just used to, first of all, group is used at the instance level to group instances, and then this HHT, I don't know it, and then the network access control is also is used as the subnet level, right? Yeah, and then the bucket policy, I know that you can write to permit who to read, who to edit, who to delete things in the bucket.
Yeah, so security group is used as a, you say security group is used to group EC2?
Yeah,
yeah, so just correction there, security group is used as a, it's like a firewall for EC2 instances. It's like the firewall, so you can use to protect your EC2 instances, right? But then the network access control is used at the subnet level. So still like the firewall at the subnet level. So you always hear security in AWS is in depth. So you always start, each level you have its own security, each level you have its own security, right? So this is a security group here is more of, we were talking about that. It's primarily used as a virtual firewall for your EC2 instances, right? But that was correct about the network access control list. It's an optional security layer at the S3. SSH is something completely else. But the major point is, once you know what is being used to grant permissions to buckets, we did have user policy and we have bucket policy. Those are the key two that you use. But here, there's no user policy, only bucket policy. These ones, once you know what they are, they don't fit the bill, right? So that's good. So I think we're finished with him now. Let's go to Kinyui. So a customer wants to further secure his network beyond security groups and network access control lists. Which of the services below can be used to provide the additional security features? Select 2. So we were just talking about security is always in depth. You have the security groups, you have the network access control list. But now a customer wants to further secure his network. So the key network beyond that. So which services can provide that? Okay, can you say guard duty and WAF? So you're talking about C and E, right? Yeah, okay. Anyone has a different view? Maureen says C and E. So I see the majority support C and E. Thank you for that. Just as well. So thank you all. Let's see if that's correct. And of course, that's correct. All these SQS, who remember what SQS stands for? Thank you, Linda, as well. You had C and E. Your connection is missing your video. Who remember what SQS stands for?
Simple querying service.
Thank you. Yeah. Always important to remember those abbreviations. I know there are many, but they will help you in answers as well. So Amazon SQL Simple Queuing Service, AWS Single Sign-On, all of these things don't have anything to do with security. This one, what is AWS Key Management Service used for? At times it's always written AWS KMS. What is that one used for?
Encryption.
Encryption, right. So when you start dealing with encryption, you want your data to be encrypted, you can use the AWS Key Management Service. And I encourage everyone to review that if you are missing what it is. Yeah. So yeah, we have talked about that. We have just talked about KMS. It's a central repository for encryption keys in your account. And the encryption keys are the ones that can help you with your encryption. It cannot be used to protect your network. So yes. Guard duty, we did cover it, threat dictation, WAF, web application firewall. Okay, I think I don't have much to say there again. Let's move to the next question. I think we have covered everyone. I think I'll go back to Edwin again. Edwin, this is for you. Which of the following should you use if you need to provide temporary AWS credentials for users who have been authenticated through their social media logins, as well as for guest users who do not require any authentication?
I think it's A.
Okay. You say you think it's A. Anyone who is confident?
B, Amazon Cognito Identity Pool.
Okay, we have A and we have B. Any other person to break? Okay, Larry says B. All right. So 2 people says B. So let's look at what majority say here. The majority is right in this case. So this is an opportunity to learn about, in case you haven't, Amazon Cognito Identity Pool, and then maybe let's revise that. So Cognito Identity Pool, just as it says, provides temporary AWS credentials for users who are guests and for users who have been authenticated and received a token. Identity pool is a store of user identity data specific for your account. So it provides temporary AWS credentials for users who are guests unauthenticated, right? But with pools, you create unique identities or assign permissions for your users. So your identity pool can be user identity. Your identity pool can include users in an Amazon Cognito user pool, users who authenticate with external providers like Facebook, and users authenticate through their existing authentication process. So user pool, and I know when you do these services, because that's what I encountered, and of course, I also did struggle with this. People always struggle with what's the difference between Cognito Identity Pool and Cognito User Pool, right? So the first thing I want you to always remember is that identity pool always, Cognito Identity Pool always can include users in the Amazon Cognito User Pool. So identity pool stands out there. So if you are thinking of, so identity pool is always dealing with permissions, right? You can always, when you think of identity pools, you can always think of permissions. When you think of a user pool, you just think of a group of users, something like, yeah. So identity pool, you always think of permissions. Is the one that is enable you to create unique identities and assign permissions for users. But when you think of an Amazon Cognito user pool, just think of this user pool. It's just a pool of users. So so when you want to create identity pool, your identity pool can be able to include members who are from the user pool. It can be members who have logged in using Facebook. So you remember, for most of you, I'm sure some of you have experienced this. You go to a website and you want to sign in, it will ask you whether you should use your Google account or Facebook account or something like that. in the background, it may have something like in this case, users who are logging in with external providers like Facebook, right? User are authenticated through your own existing authentication process. So with identity pools, users can come from these different locations, right? So just try to learn this now if you about identity pool and user pool. Identity pool is always dealing with permissions, and Cognito user pool is always dealing with a pool of users. And permissions can be assigned to members of the Cognito user pool. Yeah, so those words can play in your mind and have you confused. Then AppSync it's a service that enables cross-device syncing of application-related user data. It's also a serverless graph and PubSub API service. While single sign-on always leads you to centrally manage SSO access to multiple accounts. So remember that in real life, most companies don't just have one AWS account, they have many, many accounts. And at times, signing into different accounts is just a headache, right? So AWS created a single sign-on service that can enable you to be able to sign in once and have access to all the accounts. You can then just have to pick the one you need. It does not allow any guest or unauthenticate users. So you have to sign on first. So when you think of single sign-on, think of centrally managing SSL access to multiple accounts. Just like when you think of AWS organizations, right? You're thinking of having all your accounts managed under one area where you have the master account that's in charge of receiving the bills. So, and when you study and go ahead, we'll see how SSLOS also work with organizations. That will be in the next course that you will take. But I'm just trying to tell you what this give you something similar. You have we have many AWS account. The next thing is how do you manage these accounts, from one particular location. So I hope this Amazon Cognito identity pool and Amazon Cognito user pool, you people did grab what that was. Any question on that? Okay, we've covered 13 questions. Would have been great if we finish all of this, but it's not possible. What we're going to do is we're definitely going to use, I hope this will be okay for most of you. I know it may not work for all, but definitely Friday morning, we'll do revision as well, and Sunday morning. If we do that, we'll cover a lot. So we have missed the session yesterday, but in the following days, we do Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. I hope that will work for most of you so that we cover as much as possible and get you guys ready. Yeah. Is anyone against that? Or is there anyone for it? Let me ask it in that way.
Yes.
More people are worried. Only one person is worried. Okay, Maureen says that would be great.
That's okay.
Yeah, so we have to do that. And if you miss that, you can always try to check the recording, right? So that's okay by many people. Okay, that's great. So let's take this one and then we'll go. Anyone can come and answer this. As an AWS customer, what offering do you naturally inherit from AWS after you sign up? So as an AWS customer, what offering do you naturally inherit from AWS after you sign up? Any person can answer that one. That's for everyone.
Try D.
D, okay, so what do you always inherit? Two people say D. What about the others? Add something or say something.
Uh, excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I've come in contact with this very question, and then I was like talking about the shared responsibility, which my responsibility should be about my security, about software and other stuff. But then the answer was about inheriting a hardware security. So I was confused why that. So here, according to the answer that I saw last time, should be A.
Okay, you already did this. So you think it's A.
Mhm.
You did not understand why it was A. Okay. So let's see. Okay, more people are here, but for now, I think more people here say D. I have two D. So let's check and see which one, and then come back to what you are saying. So it's none of that. So as an AWS customer, what offerings do you naturally inherit from AWS after you sign up? So do you naturally inherit all the hardware and software that you provision? You don't really inherit it, all the hardware and software, because the question is, what do you naturally inherit? Because when you sign up, immediately you sign up, right? You've not even had, if you create an AWS account, you don't even yet have anything here, like hardware and software that you provision. So you have just signed up. So nothing has happened yet. This one of all the responsibilities in enforcing security and compliance policies of your organization. In enforcing security and compliance policies of your organization. So all the responsibility. So when you sign up for AWS, you still have to enforce, because every organization has different ways in which they want to comply with AWS, how they want to enforce security. And for you to comply with that, you have to follow your organization, maybe it could be their manual, right? So when you sign up in AWS, you've done, your organization has, you still have to follow the responsibilities in enforcing security of your organization. It's not automatically inherited because you have just signed up, because every organization will be different. All the data you store in and retrieve from AWS, all the data you store in and retrieve from AWS, what do you naturally inherit? All the best practices of AWS policies, architecture, and operational processes built to satisfy your requirements. Now, because AWS is being built with different set of things in mind, right? Best practice policies, architecture, and operational processes. So when you sign up, you surely get definitely get all of that. So it's like, remember, you have just signed up. Immediately after you sign up, AWS has been built to meet up some particular requirements. So when you sign up, you then have access to those requirements. But let's see what they have said here. AWS, for hardware and software, AWS retains full control of their physical infrastructure. So the hardware in AWS, you don't inherit it, it doesn't become yours, right? Or you can control the host in which your EC2 is running. They all belong, AWS still own the data centers. When you sign up, you don't inherit the data center or the software. All the data you store and retrieve from AWS is incorrect because AWS does not take ownership of your data to begin with. So there's nothing to inherit, right? So all the data you store in AWS, remember when you sign up, what do you inherit? So the data you store belongs to you. It does not belong to AWS. So you cannot inherit data that already belongs to you. That's what this one is explaining here. So AWS doesn't even have ownership of it, so you cannot even be inheriting it from AWS. It's your data, right? all responsibilities in enforcing security and compliance of your organizations is incorrect because AWS handles security of the cloud while the customer handles security in the cloud. All the responsibilities in enforcing the security and compliance policy of your organization. So you still have to do that because every organization will be different. AWS can say how organizations want to manage security, but it provides services that they can use to be able to manage how they want their security in the cloud. So, so those are the key things here that eliminate. So the key thing is, what do you naturally inherit? The hardware and the software, they still belong to AWS. You can't inherit that, right? The data you store, it always belongs to you. So it does not become AWS data. You cannot be inheriting what is yours. The security policies and compliance of your organizations is still something that still has to be enforced. It does not naturally happen immediately. So that's why these other ones are wrong. And then this is the correct one. Any question? That was a very tricky one, but I hope after the explanation, it helps bring more clarity. Any question or worry? Can someone speak?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
Oh, I am fine.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. Great. So that it's already 8 past the hour. I see Maureen is still motivated. So what we'll do is we'll stop here because it's it's time for maybe some people to go to bed and time for others to start the day. We did 14 questions. We'll try to finish the remaining questions on Friday, and then maybe on Sunday complete start another one. So we have 16 questions. As you see, we are still slow trying to explain everything, but after maybe 2 weeks we'll then have to step up the pace. But we can also move faster. You keep seeing how the questions are. You keep seeing the importance of really knowing your services, right? When you talk about guard duty, you should know what that is. You should talk about CloudTrail, you should just know what it is. WAF, security groups, make sure you go and learn when to use security groups, when to use network access controllers, what are the difference between them. It's in the notes, I know. So please go back to that. That's just the key. Learn databases, the different databases, and don't forget the advantages of AWS that we did cover early on. What are those 6 advantages of AWS when we talk about horizontal scaling, vertical scaling? What are we talking about? Those concepts should be much more clearer. When we talk of agility, what does that really mean? So knowing some of those things can put you in a much more better path in preparation. Don't forget billing and pricing. It's always one of those tricky area. The different support plans that exist and how they are. I know Lady T covered a good part of that session, and you can go back to that notes and listen if you are forgetting. What we are covering today was mostly security questions, so that's why you see mostly security, but we'll try to finish that on Friday. Yeah, okay, that was it. Let me stop the recording, and if anyone